Hi. I'd like to talk to you today about the state of the airline industry and our company. I've made this tape because our industry is going through a very difficult period, which I'm afraid is likely to persist for some time, which means that it is important for everyone to understand the significance of the changes we recently announced to our long-term strategic plan. Now, because this is a complex subject, it is easy for misinformation to circulate and for misunderstanding to set in. Therefore, let me say at the outset that American Airlines is not about to go broke. But our whole industry has a very real problem. Thus, there is every reason for everyone who works in the airline business, including all of us, to be worried about where we are going in the long term. The basic problem is quite simple. Every business must earn consistent and adequate profits, and we are not doing so. Now, that is a particularly serious problem for the airline industry because airlines must invest far more money than most businesses. Typically, we invest more every year than we earn. Thus, being able to borrow lots of money on favorable terms is extremely important. And only successful airlines will be able to do so. And because aircraft are ordered long before they are delivered, we must be sure that our future earnings will be sufficient, or we could get in real trouble. In the past, the airline industry has not made much money. While the industry was regulated, that didn't matter very much because airlines didn't fail. Now that we're deregulated, and I do want to remind you that American has done much better since deregulation than it ever did before, airlines can and do fail. Thus, profits are far more important now than in the past. As many of you know, the industry was in great difficulty in the early 1980s, and American was in more difficulty than most. Many thought we would be unsuccessful. As you know, we proved them wrong. American has been the most successful airline since deregulation. There are many reasons for that. One of them is that you have consistently done a fine job for our passengers, our shippers, and our other customers. We also had a good plan. Back in 1982, we worked out a way to lower our costs relative to those of our competitors. And as a consequence, we were able to grow faster than other airlines. That growth drove unit costs down, thus making us more successful than other carriers. Unhappily, being better than the others in today's airline industry isn't good enough. Almost every airline will lose money in 1991, and most lost money in 1990. Only Southwest, which has very low costs, has been consistently profitable. Now, what's happened since 1988? When we earned $476.8 million. It's really quite simple. Here's a chart which shows that our unit costs, our costs per available seat mile, have risen sharply since 1988. Here's another chart that shows that during the same years, our revenue per available seat mile has grown much more slowly. Now let's put the two lines on the same chart. You can see that costs now exceed revenues, and that means, of course, that we are losing money. Now, there are three important questions that we must think about. The first is, why have our costs gone up so sharply since 1988? The second, why haven't revenues kept pace? And the third, what is likely to happen in the future? Is our present situation simply a reflection of hard times, or do we have a long-term problem? Let's take them one at a time, beginning with costs. Despite our growth, which has helped keep our unit costs down, the cost of producing each available seat mile has gone up by 20%. Very simply, we are spending more to produce our product than we did in 1988. Now, while the cost of acquiring new aircraft accounts for some of that increase, since new airplanes are more expensive than old ones, the real problem is that our other costs, things like aircraft maintenance and facility rentals and travel agent commissions and Wages and benefits have gone up much faster than available seat miles. Let's start with maintenance. Maintenance now costs 21% more per ASM than it did in 1988. In the years ahead, we expect maintenance costs to keep right on rising. Facility expenses are also going up, and today are 35% more per available seat mile than they were in 1988. Building and renovating terminals and other facilities is enormously expensive. Moreover, as carriers go bankrupt and refuse to pay their bills, airports often pass on their share of the burden to us. Travel agents are becoming more and more dominant as distributors of airline reservations, and airlines are competing aggressively for their support. As a result, our commission expense per available seat mile has increased by 11% since 1988. Benefit costs are also going up fast, despite the introduction of programs like Flex and managed care. Dramatic increases in medical costs and workers' compensation have driven our employee benefit costs per available seat mile up 26% since 1988. Wages and salaries are up as well. As you'd expect, because we have many more employees, the total amount we spend on wages and salaries has grown substantially. Now, that's not bad news by itself, but the fact that wages and salaries per available seat mile have increased by 13% is very bad news indeed. That has happened both because individuals are earning more and because productivity is down. That is, we have more people per available seat mile than we had 3 years ago. Now, one of the things that has driven productivity down is our emphasis on better service. Unless we find new and better ways to do our jobs, we cannot both increase productivity and continue to give good service. In total, setting aside changes in fuel prices, cost per available ASM has increased by 16% since 1988. To put that another way, if we were able to produce each available seat mile for the same amount that we spent in 1988, we would reduce our annual expenses by $1.3 billion. Rising fuel costs have only made things worse. They have added another $600 million to our costs since 1988. Now, all of that is very discouraging. Even more discouraging is the fact that we expect unit costs to keep rising fast in the years ahead, and that assumes we keep on growing. If we are forced to stop growing, our cost per available seat mile will go up even faster. Now let's turn to the subject of revenues. Passenger revenues in the airline business are a function of two factors. One is our load factor, that is, the percentage of our seats which are occupied. The other is yield, the amount in terms of cents per mile that we collect from each passenger. Now, we have done very well at keeping our load factor high. Despite a weak economy, our load factor is about the same as it was in 1988. Hence, it is clear that the revenue problem is not a load factor problem. There are lots of people traveling. The problem is that our yield is too low because two kinds of airlines keep ticket prices down. The first of those two types have very low costs. Southwest is the best example. Southwest flies only short hauls and offers very basic services. For example, it doesn't offer advanced boarding passes, it doesn't have galleys on its airplanes, it has its flight attendants do all of the cleaning between flights, it turns its planes around in 10 minutes. It generally runs a very simplified operation. For all those reasons, Southwest costs are roughly 25% lower than ours. Therefore, they have no reason to raise fares. Unfortunately, in those markets where we compete with Southwest, and there are many such markets, particularly around the Dallas-Fort Worth and San Jose hubs, we must either match or at least come close to their fares. Otherwise, everyone will simply choose to fly with Southwest. The second and much more serious problem is caused by the carriers who are bankrupt. Those carriers are simply not paying all their bills. They are not paying some of the monies they owe airports. They are not paying back the amounts they have borrowed. They are using their bankruptcy to negotiate reduced aircraft leases, and in some cases, they simply aren't making those payments. In some cases, they are not funding their employees' pensions, and they aren't making any investments for the future. Now, because they are not paying all their bills, they can set lower fares. And because the public chooses airlines primarily on the basis of price, we must match those fares for at least some of our seats. And that keeps our average fares too low. In fact, 92% of our passengers fly on discounts which average 60%. And while it makes sense to offer carefully controlled discount fares to induce people to travel more, offering discounts to business travelers who will not travel anymore because fares are lower makes no sense at all. Unfortunately, there is nothing that American Airlines, by itself, can do about this problem. Until all airlines are prepared to charge adequate fares, we see no way to increase revenues enough to cover our steadily rising costs. Now, here's the distressing thing about the future. We know that costs will continue to rise rapidly. Wages and benefits go up every year, and medical costs will keep rising. Every city and county and state government in the United States is short of money, and every one of them is raising taxes. Travel agent commissions continue to rise as travel agents leverage one airline against another. The cost of complying with environmental regulations is rising, as is the cost of maintenance. Our facility costs will go up as we renew and rebuild terminals like JFK and Newark and Los Angeles and Chicago and others. And of course, each time we buy a new airplane, we must pay interest on the money we borrow. On the other hand, as I pointed out already, if we do not buy new airplanes, we have only the same number of seats each year across which to spread expenses. Thus, not growing pushes unit costs up rather than down. Well, what's the solution? The truth is, there is no easy answer. And that's why we've decided, at least for the time being, not to make any new capital commitments. That doesn't mean that we are going to shrink the airline. We already have firm commitments for lots of airplanes in 1991 and 1992 and 1993. But as we get to the years beyond 1993, we are not committed for airplanes. We merely hold optional delivery positions. Thus, until there are changes which will allow us to forecast profits, we will seek to avoid new commitments. Well, what changes are needed? First, average ticket prices must go up. Second, we must do all we can to slow the rate at which costs are rising. But we can do that only by either finding new and better ways to do our job or by reducing the service we offer our customers. Unless we find ways to restrain costs, there is simply no alternative to prices so high that many customers will stay home. And that, of course, will mean even slower growth. Now, what does all that mean for you individually? For you, for every other American employee, and for all of us in management? It means that the future is less certain and less hopeful than we thought it would be a year or so ago. But it does not mean that the situation is hopeless, and it most certainly does not mean that there's nothing that we can or should do. Eventually, since the airline industry is absolutely vital to this country, prices will go up. However, they probably won't go up by nearly enough to assure profits for every airline. Moreover, competition will remain very, very intense. Assuming that all airlines are forced to grow more slowly rather than faster, every airline will be desperately pursuing every passenger, every pound of freight, every mail and express shipment. Thus, it will be very, very important for us to provide the very best service we can. For this reason, the most important thing for every one of us to do now is to dedicate ourselves to being a competent, fully participative member of the American Airlines team. Our industry is changing dramatically, and each of us owes our fellow employees the full benefits of our ideas about how things could be done better and our very best effort to provide the industry's best service. We need an edge in the contest for success, and the only edge we can count on is our collective effort to produce the best product at the lowest cost, and thus be a winner despite our industry's problems. And winning is important to each and every one of us, for only by winning can we earn the security that we and our families want and need. Let me now bring this presentation to a conclusion by summarizing as follows. Our recent announcement about reducing capital spending is not a signal that we are going broke. We are not. But recent costs and revenue trends are very troublesome. And we do not think that our industry's problems are temporary. The next several years are going to be extremely challenging. To meet the challenge, we need everyone's help as we seek to produce the industry's best product at the lowest possible cost. Now, as I said at the outset, this is a confusing, a difficult, and a complex subject. I've done my best to explain what I think is happening. I assure you that all of us in management are doing our best to choose strategies and tactics which will make it possible for us to prevail. But we truly need your help. Indeed, every member of our team needs the help of every other member. We simply must find the best and cheapest way to do everything. And we simply must be the airline of choice for as many customers as possible. Thank you very much for watching. Your supervisor or manager will be glad to talk with you further. And of course, I'll look forward to seeing you at next spring's President's Conference, when we'll all have another opportunity to discuss these and other subjects. Thank you again. Good luck to every one of you.